Hello. Today I'll be discussing one of the most controversial public policy issues in the United States, police reform and the movement to defund the police. This topic became especially prevalent in after the death of George Floyd in 2020, when millions of Americans began demanding changes in the way police departments operate. Excuse me. Although the conversation is often presented as choosing between supporting the police or opposing them, I believe that the issue is much more complex than that. My research shows that there's legitimate concerns about police accountability, training, and community trust. However, the evidence also suggests that completely defunding police departments is unlikely to improve public safety. Instead, I'll argue that meaningful police reform combined with investment in community resources is a way more effective way of eliminating of coming to a solution rather than eliminating police funding. Uh, and here is why this topic matters. Before discussing the debate itself, I think it's important to understand why this topic affects everybody. Police officers respond to emergencies. They investigate crimes, enforce laws, and help keep communities safe. At the same time, they have significant authority over people, including the power to detain people and to use force when necessary. Because of these responsibilities, communities expect police officers to be respectful, well trained, and accountable. Uh, Several highly publicized incidents involving excessive force by the police, damaged public trust in a lot of police departments. These events led people to question whether current police practices are effective and whether changes are necessary. This debate is important because it directly impacts public safety, government spending, criminal justice policy, and just the relationship between police officers and law enforcement and the communities that they serve. Regardless of political beliefs, most people agree that they want both safe communities and fair policing. Now, what does defund the police mean? One of the biggest misunderstandings in this debate is the phrase defund the police. For some people, the phrase means eliminating police department entirely and replacing them with community-based organizations. Others use the phrase to mean reducing police budgets and redirecting some funding towards mental health services and education, housing assistance, and substance abuse treatment. Supporters argue that many social problems should not always require a police response. They believe that investing in community services could prevent crimes before they even occur. However, critics argue that reducing police budgets could result in fewer officers in the law enforcement department, slower emergency um, response times, and fewer resources for the officers to actually investigate crimes. They believe reforms should focus on improving policing rather than reducing the ability for them to respond to emergencies. Supporters of defunding police uh, believe that many issues currently handled by law enforcement are actually social and civil problems rather than criminal ones. For example, someone experiencing a mental health crisis would probably benefit more from a trained specialist than an armed police officer. They also argue that communities with better access to education, affordable housing, uh, substance abuse treatment, and youth programs are less likely to experience these crimes in the first place. And that instead of spending additional money only after crime occurs, they believe that investing money in these services before they occur could address some of these underlying issues. Another important argument is that police officers are often asked to respond to situations outside of their typical and traditional scope of law enforcement, such as homelessness, substance abuse, and mental health issues. Uh, Whether or not someone agrees with these proposals, the arguments that have influenced these arguments have influenced many conversations about policing over the several years and are important to understand before looking at the extra evidence. So, Now that we've looked at arguments supporting the defunding police, it's important to understand why many people disagree with that approach. One of the biggest concerns is public safety. Police officers respond to emergencies such as violent crimes, domestic violence, robberies, active threats. Critics argue that reducing police budgets could reduce or could result in fewer officers, slower response times, and fewer resources to investigate those crimes. Uh, Many opponents of defunding the police believe that the real problem isn't police department that the police departments exist, is that some of the departments need better policy, they need better training, and they need better oversight. Uh, Instead of reducing funding, they argue that police departments should invest in more de-escalation trainings and body-worn cameras and community policing, which I believe is very important. Uh, Another concern is that police officers are often expected to respond immediately after emergencies happen. Even if communities invest in more social services, there will be situations where trained law enforcement are necessary to protect the public. These these concerns don't mean that the policing is perfect right now. Instead, they suggest that improving policing may be more effective than reducing its ability to respond when people need help. So, what does the research say? So, rather than relying on my opinions, I wanted to see what the academic research actually says about police reform. One of the most common reforms is the use of body worn cameras. Several studies found that body cameras can increase transparency and improve officer accountability. Although researchers also found that cameras alone don't automatically reduce misconducts, their effectiveness depends on the department and how they use the footage and enforce their own policies. Researchers also studied the de escalation training. These programs teach officers communication skills re- designed to reduce conflict between situations or before situations even happen. Studies found that officers who completed this training generally communicated more respectfully with civilians and handled situations more calmly. Another important reform is community policing. Uh, Instead of only responding to crime, community policing encourages officers to build relationships and build bonds with the citizens of the neighborhoods and the cities in which they patrol. Researchers show that when communities trust police officers, they are more likely to cooperate with investigations and even to report crimes. Overall, the research suggests that successful reform involves multiple strategies working together rather than relying on a single simple solution. The evidence-based solutions. Based on the research I reviewed, several reforms appear to have strong support from researchers. First, improving officer training, especially in communication and de escalation. Better training just helps officers to make safer decisions during stressful situations. The second is expanding community policing, as I said before. Building these relationships just it encourages residents to trust and cooperate with police. The third is increasing accountability through the body worn cameras, independent investigations, and clear department policies as well. Accountability just helps strengthen the public's confidence and trust when mistakes occur. Uh, Finally, many researchers support expanding the mental health crisis teams and other community services, as I previously mentioned when I spoke about the support of defunding the police. So this is my position on the topic. After researching both sides, I believe that police reform is ultimately the better solution. I agree that there are legitimate concerns about excessive force being used, accountability, and community trust. These problems should not be ignored, and reforms are necessary. However, I don't believe that broadly defunding the police would solve these issues. Communities still depend on police officers to respond to emergencies and investigate serious crimes. Eliminating resources without replacing those responsibilities could create new public challenges, especially concerning safety. Instead, I think government should continue funding law enforcement while also investing in reforms that could improve transparency, accountability, and officer training. At the same time, cities should expand mental health services and other community programs so police are not expected to handle every situation that arises. Finding a balanced solution. To conclude, the debate over policing is much more complicated than choosing between police reform and defunding police. Most people want the same outcome: safe communities where everybody is treated fairly and respectfully. The research I examined suggests that meaningful reform, including better training, strong accountability, and community policing, can improve policing while maintaining public safety. Although the idea of defunding the police has generated important conversations about criminal justice, the evidence suggests that broad budget cuts are unlikely to solve the underlying problems. Instead, lasting change will require cooperation between law enforcement, community leaders, policymakers, and the citizens themselves. So, thank you very much for listening. Here are my works cited if you'd like to take a look at that. But overall, just thank you for your time.